Welcome to sunny California.
Thank you. So we're here with Sonic Reality and Billy Sherwood from Circa and Yes and many other projects as a producer, engineer, multi-instrumentalist.
Hi.
And actually let's start off by talking about your latest record with Circa.
Circa and So On is what the record is called, and it is available at www.circahq.com. Brand new record, literally out just a couple of days now. And it is the third studio record for the band. The first version of the band was myself, Tony K, Alan White, and Jimmy Hahn. Then the next record was myself, Tony, Jay Shellen, and Jimmy Hahn. And now this new record is myself, Tony, Johnny Bruns, and Ronnie Siagos, great drummer. And the band just keeps evolving and making music, and we're getting shows going now and just getting back into it. We kind of took a minor detour there for a while working on this band called Yoso for a while, but Circa was always underneath, ready to move on forward with another record. So now it's time, and that's what we're doing.
So now in Circa, you have Tony K, originally from Yes and from the 90125 Yes, and then you also tour with him sometimes, just the two of you.
We've done a bunch of shows now, just the two of us, and the music is pre-recorded. I actually went into the studio and tracked drums and bass myself and created the backdrop for us to play to. So in theory, it's still just the two of us, but we play to these tracks, and I play guitar and sing, and Tony does his thing on keys. And we just came back from Japan. We did a bunch of shows there. It went really well. We filmed it, and we've got a DVD of that show that's going to be released. And we've got some offers to do more shows like that. So it's kind of a strange little niche thing that created out of nowhere. This promoter in Mexico called us and said, what about doing an acoustic show in Mexico, just the two of you? And as a lot of artists are doing these days.
Right.
But the thought was, let's take it to another level other than just acoustic guitar and keyboards, because you can only kind of rock so far with an acoustic guitar. And we wanted to put some energy in it and make it feel like a real rock show. So that's kind of what we did. You close your eyes, you'd swear there was a drummer and a bass player there,
Cool. And then Tony's also in Yoso.
Well, we were in Yoso. That band is done now, but we were in that together with Bobby Kimball from Toto, and we made an album that's out, and we also did a bunch of touring with it. But at the end of the day, our hearts are in progressive rock music, and that's what we really wanted to do. So that's why we're still continuing the circuit doing our thing.
Cool. So speaking of progressive rock, you started off, one of your first bands was World Trade.
Yes.
The progressive
second
rock.
band, that one. Yeah. It was very much progressive, to the point where people kind of imagined it being very like taking that Yes flag and running with it. And when that record came out, rumor was that I was joining Yes as the lead singer and replacing, they had no singer at the time. John was doing ABWH. And the rumor was, well, Billy just left World Trade and he's joining Yes. So all of a sudden, all the momentum we had with World Trade kind of went away. And unfortunately, that band kind of ran its course. But I loved the first record. I've enjoyed the second record too. And, very proggy. It's kind of was the record that introduced me in a strange way into the Yes world. And also just really got me heading into progressive rock fully. First album I ever made was Logic, with Jimmy Hahn, who was in Circa, Guy Allison, who was the keyboard player in World Trade, and my brother, and Gary Starnes, the drummer. And that record, it was our first record, and it had conflicting messages in the way the songs were. Was it pop or was it prog? And I was always trying to pull it to be more progressive, and some of the other guys were always trying to make it more hit-oriented and poppy. And so, after that record, going into World Trade was like really just taking the prog thing and going for it. So,
And then how did you get hooked up with Yes? And
that record was what led them to me. Chris Squire heard the demos for World Trade and said, "Wow, this guy would be perfect to replace blah blah blah." And so I got a phone call. Chris Squire, I'd like to meet you and have dinner and blah blah blah. So, I was a huge Yes fan. I was like, wait a minute, what? Sure, where are we going? So I met Chris and we hit it off, and one thing led to another, and we wrote a song, which was the first song we ever wrote together. It was called The More We Live, which is on the Yes Union album. And from there, it was like obvious that we had the chemistry going musically, and we just kind of went on from there. The Yes journey is a very long one. It's funny because there's people who think I kind of, won a contest to join Yes one day, and that's how I got in. It's a long, long road, which started
Sure.
in 1989,
Wow.
and flirting around with that concept of a lot of people wanted me to take that job, and I was the only one who was saying, not really my job, guys. I'd love to join Yes, but not as the lead singer. That's John Anderson's job, not mine.
Right.
So during that period, they joined the supergroup Union, right? Super Yes with all of them, and they went on to do that, and I went into production and started making records with other artists, and then got a phone call from Yes. Would you like to come out on the road with us? We're going to do the talk tour. We want you to play. Come on, be a sideman and play. So I said, sure, let's go. And so I went out and did that. Then that band broke up.
Is that when you met Tony Kaye?
Yeah, that's when I'd met Tony from 89, because it was Chris Allen, Tony, who were looking to figure out what to do with Yes
Okay.
at that period. Trevor was sort of in and out, and they told me he was out, but he was sort of still in, and it was all very confusing. But talk tour, they called me and said, come tour, and I was like, wow, who wouldn't want to go do that?
Right.
Sure, let's go. So I played keys and bass, got to do the whole bass thing with Chris.
Cool.
Enjoyed it. Tour was over. That band broke up. I figured, well, that's the end of my relationship with these guys because they just broke up. What's going on here? And then I think it might have been a year later or something like that. I got a call from Chris. Look, we just reformed with Steve and we're doing this classic version and we have tracks here and we want you to mix them. Would you be interested? I said, sure. Come to my studio. So this is when my studio was in Van Nuys, not here in my house. Mixed the record. They enjoyed it. They called me back and said, we're going to make a second album, a follow-up, Keys to Ascension 2. We had a good time. Would you like to produce it and engineer it and everything? I said, sure, come on in. So we made the record. That band is together. The record's done. There's a big, big tour on the horizon for that record. And Rick Wakeman decides to quit. And so he left the band. And Yes is kind of in my studio going, wait a minute, what just happened? And I'm kind of watching this whole thing fragment. Steve went back to London, John went to Hawaii, Alan went back to Seattle, and it was Chris and I sitting in my studio. He's like, what just happened? I said, well, I can't watch my favorite band just dissolve here. We got to take some initiative and try to do something. Let's start writing some material and see what happens. So now, through that process, Chris and I start writing. Play it for Alan. What do you think? Alan says, love it. Want to play on it. So he plays on it. Cool. What do you think about? Should we send this to John and see if he digs it? Send it to John. He loved it and he wanted to sing on it and write on it. And so now all of a sudden there's this shape taking place, and Steve got involved, and before you know it, there was this record, Open Your Eyes, that had been completed and was an important record to keep the band moving forward. There's a lot of people out there who think that when I joined the band, somehow I came in with a machete and carved Wakeman out of it and said, forget keys, it's done, it's my turn. No, it didn't work that way.
Right.
I was trying to motivate the band to remain a band. And through that process, it worked, because we did a record that, Good, Bad, or Indifferent, sold a lot of units, moved the band forward, got us on a lot of touring, and then we made a follow-up record to that with that lineup called The Ladder in Vancouver. At that point, the band kind of wanted me to get out of the production role and from behind and just be one of them. You know what I mean? So I was like, no problem. So we got Bruce Fairbairn to produce the record and toured that record like mad. When that touring cycle was done, or near its end, I should say, I kind of started feeling like I've given pretty much all I have to this band to give, and I can sense that they're craving to go back to their roots and just play classic Yes music. I just knew that was what they were really looking to do. And for me, I was always about wanting to move forward and do new things. So it became apparent, and I just decided at that point, I'm going to depart. And so I put in my resignation and came back home here to my house and started doing jingles with Jonathan Elias, who, strangely enough, was the co-producer of the Union album where it all started.
Wow.
So that's the story. It's kind of long and arduous, but did not win the lottery to join the band. There was a good 10-year run up to before I even got involved in that level. So
Cool.
that's how it worked. You know.
So tell me about some of the projects you've worked on as an engineer producer.
Started dabbling with engineering early on, getting frustrated waiting for engineers to show up to make your music. So it was like, man, just give me the knob. What do we have to do? That turned into a career, you know. And the first break that I had that really kind of set the template for being able to do it legitimately and have people back you financially and let you do a job like that was the Paul Rogers record that I made. I was signed onto that record, and it was a tribute to Muddy Waters, the blues artist. Paul Rogers did it in his own way with interesting arrangements. Jason Bonham on drums, Pino Palladino on bass.
Nice.
Amazing musicians surrounding the whole project: Jeff Beck, David Gilmour, Slash, Steve Miller, you know, just so many I can't even remember off the top of my head.
Cool.
So that record was done in 1993, I think it was. And Grammy nominated record. We lost that year to Buddy Guy, who played on our record, which was, I was happy for him, but I was also like, what a drag. We just lost. But it made enough of a splash that all of a sudden I started getting calls from other people to do, you know how to make those kind of records, could you do one for us, kind of thing.
Cool.
That led to being involved with a company that was producing many of those, and I did, you know, tributes to Jeff Beck, Ace Frehley, Queen, you know, Queen 2, Aerosmith 2, you know, just so many that I've forgotten now, but I've probably covered just about every artist there is there. And along the way, you get to work with all these amazing people, you know. I used to, the business has changed since I was doing those, but I used to have carte blanche and be able to call anyone I wanted and have the funds to make the phone call work, so to speak, you know. And so my wish list was huge. And over the period of 12 years or whatever it was making those records, 10 years, I worked with probably about, you know, 100 of my favorite people on planet Earth who ever wanted to, you know, do something with. So for that I was grateful to be able to make those records. And along the way, a lot of those projects spawned other things that developed, original things. One of them is this John Wetton record that I just produced. It's called Raised in Captivity. It's just recently out. John and I had been working on tribute records, a lot of them, and we were getting along great and going back and forth. And I said to him one day, you know, look, man, we've redone other people's music. We should create our own now. It's time. You know, let's try this. And he took the leap of faith, and, you know, his new record, he said, I want Billy to produce it. Let's go for it. Cool. So he actually flew here, you know, to LA. He stayed around the corner from us here, and we worked for 30 days straight in my studio inside there. And we co-wrote 9 of 13 songs. He had the other songs pretty much together. And we just produced that album. I produced the album. And it's got Eddie Jobson, one of my favorite proggies of all time. Yeah. Jeff Downes is on there, Tony Kaye, Steve Morris from the Dregs and Deep Purple, Steve Hackett from Genesis, the dude from Uriah Heep. You know, there's just
Robert
Fripp's on there.
Reunite.
Yeah. Little Crimson action there.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of like a progger's fantasy come true to be able
yeah.
to sit in that environment and make something like that, especially with John Wetton, who turns out to be, you know, I mean, they say don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed kind of thing, you know. Right. Not in this case. For producing and engineering, you know, I love making music, I love making records, I love working with sound, and I love the challenge of working with sound. Of course, without any opinions coming my way, I go for the sound I want to go for.
Right.
Working with other people, they have a vision for their music, and so they might, you know, turn my trajectory another direction with a certain sound and push me another way, and the challenge to get their ears to hear what they want. So all those things combined make it a really cool experience to be able to do. Owning my own studio means I can pump out the productions a lot quicker than maybe the average bear who has to wait to find the funds to get into a studio or to get that creative desire to go into the studio. Here, when I'm not working on work for other people, 2 in the morning, I may get a melody in my head that's like, I got to go in there and jot it down, and I go in there and start recording, and an hour later I've kind of got a new thing going, which starts heading towards another solo album or something. So
Right.
so it all works towards the craft, production, engineering, and music. It's, for me, it's become one big thing. I don't think of myself as any one aspect of it anymore. It's People say, "Are you an engineer?" It's like, well, I that too.
Sure. What do you need?
Exactly. What do you need?
Cool.
So yeah.
Well, how do you feel being in a very rare position to have experienced working with all of your musical heroes growing up, listening to music, Yes, ELP, King Crimson, Genesis, about the current project we're doing with Sonic Reality, where we're taking grooves played by some of these great drummers from
Yeah.
Rush and Genesis and Peter Gabriel and whatnot, and and not only are we making music with it, but every musician out there can now have a taste of this experience that you've
Well,
had.
yeah. I mean, essentially, here's a perfect example, because I've worked with a ton and ton of people, but I haven't had the pleasure of working with Neil Peart yet. So now here we are with the Sonic Reality drum loops, and I'm working with the Neil Peart drums, which are phenomenal, sound amazing, and for the average guy out there who's just a Rush fan and wants to jam with Neil, this is the perfect experience, because there they are. That's the real deal, played by the real guy. Then for the musician who is looking to be super creative over the top of something like that, you can bend the track and take those drums and just compose something completely crazy over the top of it, which, for any of you looking, check out Trifecta. That's kind of an example of what we've done. I played the guitars and bass, he did the keys, and we composed a new piece of music over these drums. And so I think for that aspect alone, it's like it got a dual coolness about it, because it's cool to be able to play with your favorite drummer. When I was a kid learning how to play, I played with records. I played to Yes records and ELP records and Genesis and Return to Forever and Weather Report. And now to be able to actually jam with the real tracks, it's how cool is that? You know what I mean?